Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take that really dense source material you send us, sometimes profound, sometimes honestly a bit weird, and we just cut through it all.
Yeah, we try to give you the essential insights, the stuff you really need to know, without you having to wade through everything yourself.
Exactly, a shortcut to being, properly informed.
And today, oh boy, today's session feels less like a standard deep dive and maybe more like a psychological thriller, almost an ambush.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Psychological thriller.
You've got severe physical pain right off the bat. We've got some pretty deep insights into the mind-body link. And the part I think you'll appreciate, a very dramatic cat who seems to be picking up on all the bad vibes.
A psychic cat. I'm absolutely here for that. Willie the cat, psychic detective. Okay, so what's the source?
We are diving into session 52 from the early sessions, book 2 of the Seth Material.
Okay.
And this one was recorded May 11th, 1964, a Monday night, 9 p.m.
1964. Got it. And yeah, the mission today is basically to unpack this session that happened under, well, let's just say unusual circumstances. Extreme duress might be putting it mildly.
That's right. We're looking at how Jane Roberts, or Ruburt, as Seth calls her, managed to channel some incredibly personal, really sensitive stuff while being, well, physically incapacitated.
Incapacitated is a strong word.
It fits here. And we also need to dissect Seth's strategy. He actually called it a trick later on, which is fascinating. A trick to make sure this vital info got past Jane's own, subconscious blocks.
A non-physical entity playing tricks for therapeutic reasons. Okay, this sounds like quite the session.
Right.
It's almost like a master class from the beyond on intervention.
You can definitely see it that way.
All right, but before we get into the strategic trickery and the deep-seated resentments, we have our standard declaration.
Yes, the necessary bit.
This deep dive, like all our deep dives, is distributed completely free of charge across all the major platforms and is purely for educational purposes.
Okay.
Right then, let's jump into the agony, the wry neck. Okay, so setting the scene, this wasn't just like, oh, I slept funny. Jane wakes up at 6 a.m. and Robert, who Seth calls Joseph, finds her with what the notes call an extremely painful stiff neck.
Yeah, extremely is doing a lot of work there. It wasn't just discomfort. It sounds like it was agony. Serious stuff.
So bad that by noon, they'd already gone for treatment. That tells you something.
Right. And Joseph, her husband, the guy who meticulously records all these sessions, he just assumed, no session tonight, it's off. How could she possibly do it?
What actually is a wry neck, medically speaking? Is it just a muscle spasm?
It's often called acute torticollis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Basically, your neck muscles, usually on one side, go into intense spasm. It forces your head to tilt or turn, and trying to straighten it or move quickly causes, excruciating pain. So any sudden movement is out.
Okay, so imagine trying to get into that relaxed, receptive state needed for channeling when, every tiny movement is pure torture.
Exactly. And the notes describe her right before the session was supposed to start, around 8:55 p.m. She's holding her head very stiffly forward, speaking really softly, and she herself wasn't even sure Seth could come through. The doubt was real.
But here's the kicker, the really interesting part. This pain didn't just appear out of nowhere, did it? There was a trigger.
Ah, yes. The literary connection. This is fascinating. She hadn't just randomly woken up like this. The night before and leading up to it, she'd been reading a specific book.
Which book?
The Winthrop Woman by Anya Seton. It's a historical novel about American colonial life back in the 1600s.
Okay, historical fiction. What's the link?
Well, the source notes are very specific here. They say the book focused extensively with the sufferings of women in childbirth and their lot in general.
Oh, okay. That's not subtle.
Not at all. She was apparently reading it late, really immersed in these themes of, female suffering, the physical agony related to motherhood, the constraints on women back then.
So she's steeping her mind in this material about historical female pain and hardship.
And then, here's the detail that just locks the psychological connection in place. This wasn't the first time this exact book caused problems.
You're kidding? The same book.
The text explicitly says she'd had neck trouble before. Maybe not quite this bad, but noticeably after reading the very same book just a few months earlier.
Wow. Okay, that's almost unbelievable. The body remembers the trigger.
It absolutely suggests a really potent, repeating subconscious trigger. The book itself became this symbol, this key that unlocked something painful within her.
That's a really stark example of that mind-body connection we talk about. The body isn't just reacting to, a draft or bad posture. It's reacting to psychological stress, historical trauma themes filter through her on past issues.
Yeah, it's like her system flagged this book as like danger zone, old resentments ahead.
So if you think about somatization, where psychological distress shows up as physical symptoms,
It's textbook, isn't it? She's reading about women burdened, suffering, physically constrained by childbirth and society, and her own body responds by becoming burdened, rigid, constrained in its movement. The symptom mirrors the theme.
so the stage is set. Jane is physically in agony, psychologically immersed in 17th century birth trauma and female suffering, kind of hoping Seth can maybe help.
And they make the attempt. 9:00 p.m. It feels like a very unlikely scenario for anything profound to happen, doesn't it? More like a recipe for disaster.
Right. And right on time, 9 p.m., Seth does appear. But it's different. Joseph notes his voice is without emphasis, none of that usual strong, resonant quality.
He senses the situation immediately then.
Seems so. His first words are very direct, very compassionate. I will not keep you this evening for obvious reasons. My regrets to you, Ruburt, and my sympathy.
That's quite gentle, actually. Professional, almost. Recognizing the limits. Totally. He acknowledges the pain is just too much for a normal session. He promises, I will go into the reasons for his trouble during our next session. He says she simply couldn't bear up to it this evening and needs to rest.
Okay, so a very quick, sympathetic sign-off seems imminent.
You'd think so. Joseph is probably just processing this, maybe feeling a bit of relief for Jane, and then all hell breaks loose, feline style.
Enter Willie the cat, the psychic barometer.
Exactly. This is just such a perfect grounding moment in the middle of all this high-level psychic stuff. Jane is rigid with pain, trying desperately not to twitch.
Which would cause more agony.
Right. And Willie, the cat, maybe sensing the weird energy, the tension, the pain, he starts crying and actually grasping at Jane's legs and ankles, clawing at her.
Oh, no. While she can't move quickly to get away.
Precisely. The notes say she couldn't make quick movements without spasming her neck, so it was impossible to elude him. And Joseph adds this detail. Willie's claws were sharp, and they were on her bare feet.
Oh, okay. That's gone from psychic tension to actual physical assault by cat.
Pretty much. It finally forces Jane to cry out, probably a mix of pain and sheer frustration.
So much for the calm, therapeutic atmosphere.
Gone. And Joseph, the dedicated note-taker, has to abandon his post. He has to put down his paper, scoop up this frantic cat who's attacking the medium.
Mid-potential session.
Mid-aborted session, yeah. And he has to physically remove Willie and shut him in another room. It's this perfect collision of, like, cosmic consciousness work and, dealing with a needy pet.
I just love the image of Joseph patiently transcribing these deep truths from Seth, suddenly having to wrestle a cat. It brings it all down to earth, doesn't it?
It really does. But here's where it gets really interesting again. Seth didn't just ignore this interruption as, the cat was being annoying.
He comments on it.
Immediately, he offers this, instant psychological analysis of Willie's behavior. He says Willie sensed a conflict.
A conflict in Jane.
Yeah. Quote Seth, Ruburt is not quite with me this evening because of his condition, and it was this conflict that was sensed by your cat.
Whoa. Okay, let's pause there. That's the big claim. The cat wasn't just hungry or wanted attention randomly.
Seth is saying the cat was reacting specifically to Jane's internal state, her inner conflict, the dissonance between her wanting to channel, wanting to do her job, and her body absolutely refusing, being locked in pain. Willie picked up on that.
So the cat becomes this living indicator of psychic disturbance.
That's the implication, isn't it? Like a furry little barometer of unseen energies. Seth often suggests animals are way more tuned into that stuff, into emotional states and non-physical vibes, than our logical minds usually admit.
That reframes the whole annoying cat incident completely. Willie wasn't the problem, he was pointing to the problem.
Exactly. Seth does add that the condition is temporary, and he even says he thinks he's already managed in straightening him out to some degree, meaning Ruburt, but he sticks to the plan, for now.
He reaffirms the promise.
Yes. I will go into the reasons for his trouble during our next session. Rest is the priority now, and so the session ends. Very short. 9:09 p.m. Just 9 minutes. But just before Seth properly leaves that first time, there's this little aside. It's just for Joseph.
Oh, what's that?
It shows their work is ongoing, beyond Jane's immediate crisis. Seth says, you were right, Joseph. Your last experience with psychological time was most significant. He basically gives Joseph this little nod of validation.
A psychological time.
Yeah.
Right? That comes up a lot. That's about experiencing time non-linearly, right? Accessing things outside of our usual A to B to C sequence.
Exactly. It's about the simultaneous nature of reality, stepping outside chronological limits. Joseph had clearly been experimenting with this, maybe had some breakthrough or insight, and Seth just confirms, yep, you're on the right track, keep going.
Nice little bit of interdimensional encouragement there for Joseph.
It is, but then, boom, Seth pivots right back to Jane's issue, the wry neck, and specifically why she couldn't get the info herself, her blocking mechanism.
How does he explain the blocking?
He says Ruburt had actually tuned into the same information, the real reasons for her pain, but because she'd already begun to tense, physically and mentally.
Because of the pain and probably the underlying fear.
Right. She started blocking every psychological stimulus in the hopes of blocking out the right one. She was trying to shut everything down mentally to avoid the one specific, painful truth.
Okay, that sounds like a defense mechanism going into overdrive.
Yeah.
Trying to build a dam against a flood of uncomfortable truth.
Precisely. The physical tension in her neck was the outward sign of this intense inner refusal, a refusal to look at the source of the resentment the book had stirred up.
So she's trying to get numb emotionally, but the effort just ramps up the physical pain instead.
Exactly. And Seth puts it with this kind of almost dark humor. He says, unfortunately, he blocked out all of this except the right one.
Ouch. Meaning, the very act of blocking guaranteed the presence of the painful truth, just manifested physically instead of consciously.
That seems to be it. She suffered physically because she was trying to avoid suffering psychologically. The effort backfired spectacularly.
That's a profound and slightly terrifying insight into how we handle or mishandle uncomfortable truths. The body takes the hit.
Yeah. Apparently, Jane tried to laugh when she heard this analysis later, but Joseph noted her voice was still garbled from the pain. Even the attempt to laugh was physically difficult.
It's like the ultimate cruel joke from the subconscious, isn't it? Oh, you won't look at this? Fine. Try not looking at it when you can't even turn your head.
Pretty much sums it up. And Seth then gives that very brief diagnosis before he initially leaves, just reiterating the trigger. The book brought on the condition through morbid fascination on his part, bringing out many old resentments.
Morbid fascination. Old resentments. Those are the key ingredients.
That's the core, yeah. The resentment was active, festering.
So session ends at 9:09. Jane actually felt, despite the pain, that she was more dissociated than she had thought possible, meaning she found some mental distance from the pain.
Which is interesting in itself. She could partially detach.
Right, but she was still hurting badly. And everyone, Jane, Joseph, presumably Seth, thought, okay, that's it for tonight. We'll deal with the why next time.
And that belief that the session was truly over is exactly what makes the next few minutes so incredibly dramatic and, well, strategically brilliant on Seth's part.
They're sitting there, Joseph and Jane, probably just starting to talk about what little Seth did say.
Yeah, processing this first few hints about the book, the resentments, the childbirth suffering themes.
And this is when Seth pulls his therapeutic U-turn, breaks his own promise. So the official session ends. They probably breathed a small sigh of relief, even with the pain. Maybe a moment of quiet.
Relatively quiet, yeah. Still tense, I imagine, because Jane's still in agony. But the formal session pressure is off.
And then, just 3 minutes later,
Yeah.
9:01 p.m., while they're still talking about the neck pain.
Boom. Seth just reappears, energetically bursts back in according to the notes, no warning, leading straight into the second, and as it turns out, the absolutely crucial part of the delivery.
Okay, that is an ambush. Why the sudden return? Why break his promise to wait?
It seems purely strategic. Therapeutically aggressive, you might say. Seth must have judged that this was the only window. He had to strike while the pain was keeping the psychological door slightly ajar, but maybe after the initial shock had subsided just a tiny bit.
Strike while the iron is hot, or while the neck is stiff, I guess.
Pretty much. He doesn't waste any time. He goes right for the absolute core of the psychological issue behind the wry neck.
And how does he start this second surprise delivery?
He starts with a really specific visual detail, something deeply personal to Jane. He brings up her mother's characteristic pose in bed.
Her mother's pose.
Yeah. He reminds Jane, or Ruburt, that her mother suffered from arthritis, and because of it, she couldn't turn her neck normally. If she wanted to look sideways, she had to do this complete turning of the upper body, a very rigid, specific movement.
Okay. I think I see where this is going. It's chilling.
It is. Seth states directly that Jane's current state, the agonizing wry neck, was a perfect aping or adoption of her mother's physical pose caused by her disease and suffering.
So the pain wasn't random. It was a literal, physical imitation of her mother's limitation. She was embodying her mother's suffering.
Symbolically, yes. Physically manifesting the mother's condition, which leads directly to the terrifying psychological why. Why imitate the very person associated with such deep resentment?
Right. That seems counterintuitive. Why take on the suffering of someone you resent?
Seth lays out the principle, and it's pretty stark. He says the wry neck is a symbolic attempt to become the hated object.
Become the hated object. Why?
And therefore, Seth continues, to be free of any hatred that might be directed by that object toward Ruburt.
Wow. Okay, unpack that. That's dense. So by becoming like the person you fear or resent,
You neutralize their power over you, or at least you try to. It's like saying, look, I'm already suffering like you. I am you in this moment of pain, so you can't direct your anger or hatred towards me because I've already taken it on myself.
it's like a preemptive self-punishment, a deflection.
A kind of primal defense mechanism, yeah. Seth calls it a fearful attempt to become part of the feared individual and therefore escape the venom. By adopting the mother's physical symptom, Jane was unconsciously trying to protect herself from the mother's perceived or feared negative energy or judgment.
And reading the book about women suffering, especially around childbirth.
That was the catalyst. It violently reawakened this whole dynamic because, as Seth then points out, this connects directly to Jane's deepest, most painful history with her mother.
Which was?
Her mother apparently often spoke, and the notes say most vehemently, about Jane's birth being the cause of her own illness, her arthritis, and all the pain that came with it.
Oh my God. To be told your very existence caused your mother's lifelong suffering.
Can you imagine the psychological weight of that?
Yeah.
It creates this profound subconscious fear in the child that the mother resents them, blames them, maybe even wishes to punish them for the pain they supposedly inflicted just by being born.
So the wry neck, the imitation of the mother's pain, it becomes a substitute punishment.
Exactly, a self-inflicted punishment.
Mm.
The ego kind of negotiates, okay, I feel this immense guilt and fear of punishment from mom. I'll punish myself with this pain, the wry neck. Maybe that'll placate the deeper fear. Maybe that will substitute for the greater punishment I dread.
A lesser agony to ward off a bigger, more terrifying one. And did Seth specify what that ultimate feared punishment was?
He did. And this is probably the most psychoanalytically deep part of the whole session. He identifies the core fear behind it all.
Okay.
He calls it a basic and infantile terror of being pulled back into the womb and refused to deliver it.
Pulled back into the womb.
Yeah.
And refused to deliver. As in, the mother retroactively undoing the birth.
That's the terror. It's described as infantile, meaning it stems from that very early stage where the child's sense of self is so tied to the mother. The fear isn't just rejection, it's annihilation. It's the fear that the source of life, the mother, holds the power to literally reclaim that life, to negate its existence.
Because the mother implied.
Seth alleges the mother implied that if she could do it over, she would not have had the child. That kind of statement, lodged deep in the subconscious, creates this fundamental terror that the mother could, symbolically at least, enforce that wish, pull a child back, refuse the delivery, erase them.
That's profoundly disturbing, an existential dread rooted in the mother-child bond. And to have that diagnosis delivered while you're physically locked in pain.
It's almost poetically brutal, isn't it? The physical rigidity mirroring the psychological terror of being trapped or undone. The pain literally forced open the channel for this incredibly heavy truth to come through.
Okay, so Seth delivers this bombshell diagnosis, breaking his earlier promise. We have to talk about the ethics here, the strategy. He called it a trick. Is it okay for this entity to manipulate the situation like that, especially when Jane is so vulnerable?
It's a really valid question, and Seth actually addresses it directly. His justification is purely about the therapeutic necessity. He saw a critical window, maybe the only window, to get this information through.
Why was it so urgent? Why not wait until the next session, as promised?
He explains, quote, I am giving this material now because I could tell that Ruburt would clamp up on me as far as this particular subject is concerned after the pain was gone and block this material.
Ah, so the pain itself was the key? Once the pain subsided,
The defenses would go right back up. The conscious mind, the ego, the subconscious blocks would all reform, probably stronger than ever, to protect her from revisiting that core trauma. The pain was like a wedge holding the door open just enough.
So if she just taken painkillers or slept it off, the opportunity would have been lost. The insight wouldn't have landed.
That seems to be Seth's assessment. It was a strategic surgical intervention. He used the moment of maximum physical vulnerability to bypass the ingrained psychological defenses. It's less about malice and more about therapeutic expediency from his perspective. He saw the chance to lance the boil, basically.
A non-physical surgical strike on the psyche.
Okay.
But delivering that kind of heavy, traumatic insight, he didn't just leave her hanging with that, did he? With the fear of infantile terror and inheriting her mother's arthritis.
No, and that's crucial. Immediately after delivering the diagnosis of the cause, he provides definitive reassurance about the outcome.
Okay, good. What did he say?
He makes it very clear that the psychological factors that led to her mother's arthritis are simply not present in Ruburt. He gives this clear verdict.
So even though there's a family history, Jean herself doesn't have the internal psychological setup for that specific disease.
Correct. He states unequivocally that arthritis is not her destiny, despite the family connection and the current symbolic mimicry through the wry neck.
That must have been an immense relief hearing that, getting the terrifying why, but also the you're actually safe message right after.
Absolutely. He says, quote, "Quite simply, arthritis, despite its being in his family, is not one of the diseases which will ever bother him. It's a direct, powerful reassurance designed to let her release that specific fear."
Permission to let go of the inherited dread.
Exactly.
And then, having dropped the psychological bomb and provided the safety net, Seth wraps up this surprise second session. How does he end it?
With that playful, almost mischievous acknowledgement of his own strategy, he basically owns the maneuver.
What does he say?
He concludes, "Now I will leave you for the evening, having tricked Ruburt into hearing the truth upon this matter. It's for your own good, Ruburt."
Having tricked Ruburt, it's for your own good. That's quite something. A cosmic entity admitting to benevolent trickery.
It really is. And this whole second part, the ambush, the core diagnosis, the reassurance, the trick confession, it lasted only about 13 minutes. 9.1 to 9.25 p.m.
Wow. So much packed into such a short time. Depth over duration.
Totally. And Jane's reaction afterward is really telling, isn't it? About how the ego processes this stuff.
What was her take on it?
Well, she was still very aware of her sore neck, obviously, and she felt Seth had overridden her to some degree to push the material through. She didn't like being pushed.
Understand.
And she specifically admitted she had cringed mentally at Seth's use of the word infantile.
Oh, I bet. Nobody wants their current agony traced back to infantile terror. It feels belittling, maybe?
Yeah.
Strips away your adult composure.
Right. It hits right at the ego's defenses. But despite the cringing, despite feeling overridden, and despite the lingering pain,
There was a shift.
she also noted significantly that she felt a little better at the end.
So the truth, however difficult or embarrassing to the ego.
It started to work immediately. It provided some kind of psychological release that began, even slightly, to ease the physical symptom. The trick ultimately achieved its therapeutic goal. The energy block started to dissolve once it was confronted.
So let's wrap this up. What are the big takeaways for you, for the listener, from this really intense session 52?
Well, for me, the absolute core lesson is just how incredibly precise the mind-body connection can be. This wasn't a vague, generalized pain. It was a specific condition, wry neck, that perfectly symbolically mirrored the perceived limitation of the figure tied to the core resentment, the mother.
The body wasn't just hurting. It was telling a very specific story. It was acting out history.
Exactly. It forces you to think differently about physical symptoms, doesn't it? Is this just a strain, or is my body trying to communicate something deeper? What memory, what conflict is this specific pain symbolizing? The wry neck was an embodiment of fear, guilt, and that desperate attempt to deflect rejection.
And the other big thing is the dynamic between, well, the source, Seth, and the medium, Jane. Or you could generalize it to therapist and client, maybe, Seth's strategy.
That therapeutic ambush, it's fascinating. He didn't just passively wait. He actively managed the situation, used the crisis itself, the pain, as the tool to bypass the defenses. It raises questions about intervention, timing, and maybe sometimes needing a trick to get past our own self-protective blocks.
It definitely encourages us to think about how we react to our own discomforts. Do we just pop a pill for the symptom? Or do we pause and ask, like, okay, body, what's the message here? Jane's crisis was directly linked to reading a specific book that hit a nerve.
Which connects to today, doesn't it? Think about the sheer volume of emotionally charged content we consume constantly. Social media, news, even just stressful conversations.
If one historical novel could trigger that profound physical reaction in Jane because it resonated with her old wounds.
What are the constant streams of outrage, trauma narratives, political polarization, or even just everyday stresses doing to us? What subconscious buttons are they pushing?
Which leads nicely into that final thought we like to leave you with, something to maybe chew on after listening.
Yeah, building on that idea, if Jane's deep-seated, maybe even infantile resentments could be activated by a single book about historical suffering, manifesting as an agonizing physical symptom.
Then what seemingly normal or innocuous things in your daily life? Maybe it's that news feed you scroll, maybe it's a certain type of movie, maybe it's a recurring argument pattern, maybe even just a song. What things are currently acting as the keys, unlocking, and maybe destabilizing your own unresolved inner conflicts, perhaps without you even consciously realizing it.
Where are those triggers hiding in plain sight in your own world?
Something to definitely ponder. The external world is constantly interacting with our internal landscape. Every bit of consumption, every interaction is potentially either healing us or stressing that mind-body link.
Absolutely. Well, until next time, we really do encourage you, if this resonates, to explore the Seth Material books for yourself. They are full of these kinds of profound, sometimes challenging insights.
You can find out more and get the original source material like the early sessions by visiting the publisher, New Awareness Network. Their website and bookstore is at sethcenter.com/the early sessions.
It's well worth the visit.
Okay, that wraps up our deep dive into Seth's strategic trickery and the very curious, very painful case of the wry neck. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Keep listening to your body, and maybe keep an eye on your cat's behavior too. You never know.
We'll catch you on the next session.